Looks like we may be live. Hey, everybody out there. Today is Wednesday, July 8th, 2020. I want to first start out before anything else by giving a special shout out to my mother, Ronnie Hall, who's celebrating her natal day today. So please join me in wishing her a very happy and joyous and prosperous natal day as she celebrates her birthday today. If there was no her, there certainly would be no me. Um, so definitely celebrating my mother on her special day, and really want to definitely acknowledge her and the value of her existence on the planet, and all of the wonderful seeds that she's sown in me uh, and my siblings uh, and everybody in our family lineage since then. Hey Jennifer, good to see you here today. Welcome. So today, just like every other Wednesday, we're here focusing on healing, on well-being, in one way or another, whether individually or collectively. So our topic today is really dealing with the quest for authenticity and healing of illness and trauma. So my initial idea was that a lot of focus for today was going to be in the area of healing as it relates to on the physical level, healing of physical conditions, particularly as we continue to see numbers climbing as far as this whole coronavirus situation is concerned. Those numbers still continue to climb. People are still dying from it. We haven't focused so much on that lately. We've been doing a lot of focus in terms of healing on a national level, in terms of a lot of the division that's being experienced right now, a lot of deep pain that's really rising to the surface. Ah, and I was initially not going to focus on that so much, so much on today's broadcast until something happened yesterday that really brought some things up for me, and I'm sure there are things being brought up for a lot of other people. So let me first start by saying this one fundamental truth. It is a fundamental truth that we're all one. Okay, every living soul upon the earth. Okay, everything that is living and breathing, whether human or not, we're all one. We're all members of creation. Now we might move differently. We might uh, have different biological functions depending on what form of life it is. Uh, Plants breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen, whereas we breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. There are definitely a lot of differences among us, but we're all fundamentally one. All life, all existence, in fact, is one. Period. That's just the way that it is. All right. Um, the way that we experience life, however, is very, very different from that a lot of the times. All right. Whereas, and I've said this before, the differences in the DNA amongst all human beings living upon the face of the earth right now is very, 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 very minuscule. All right, very, very, very minuscule. Now, there are definitely a lot of differences in terms of how we live, how we relate, uh, a lot of different things from a cultural standpoint, different belief systems that we might ascribe to as peoples living upon the earth based on what their own set of conditioning has been, what their own set of experiences has been, based on the area where they lived and so forth. We all have a lot of very different experiences of life and different expressions of who we are, and yet we're all one. And somehow, somehow we still, as human beings, we get it twisted a lot. We miss the mark a lot. All right. In the Bible, the word is referred to as sin. Okay. Which is really an archery term for missing the mark. All right. Yes, there's a lot of evil that exists in the world. There's a lot of contrast, actually, in the world between those things that we enjoy and that we celebrate, things that feel good to us, and then things that don't feel so good, things that we wouldn't wish upon ourselves, things that if we could avoid it, we would, things that are very painful and very uncomfortable that we experience. There's this contrast in the experience, it's part of the human predicament of living on planet Earth. And that manifests in a lot of different ways. It manifests in moments of joy and appreciation and hope and encouragement. And it also manifests as pain, discouragement, heartache, trauma. That's something I'm going to be talking about today a little bit and dealing with a little bit today is trauma. And then in the process of navigating these varying experiences, right? We find ourselves trying to find our place in the world or find our way of expressing who we are in the world. And a lot of times, just to be real honest, we kind of go along to get along, or we line up with whatever the popular culture is, or we line up with whatever the predominant thinking is, whether that's on a large scale or a small scale. All right, we do that. It's one of the ways that we succumb to peer pressure. All right. Sometimes those things are for righteous things, things that actually promote life, and sometimes they're for things that don't, quite honestly. And in the midst of it, sometimes while we're seeking to line up with that which, kind of acquiesces to where we feel other people are or where we think other people want to be, we sometimes lose our sense of authenticity, the sense of who we really are, or we get out of touch with what it is that we really think or how we really feel, in place of how it is that others think that we should think or feel, or how we might even think that we should think or feel that might not be in alignment with where we actually are. All right. And so, you know, yesterday I had this experience. I'm a black man living in the United States of America. Ultimately, I'm a soul whose origins aren't even on the earth in the first place. But I am currently incarnated, living as Royce Fletcher Thomason, housed in a body that has hued skin, okay, that has melanated skin. And so I definitely have a set of experiences that are reflective of the skin that I'm wearing. And I believe it's important for all people to feel comfortable in the skin that you're in, whatever skin that is, whoever you are, whatever your body looks like. There's beauty in who God made you to be. Okay, there was no mistake when God formed you and knitted you in your mother's womb. All right. And somehow, in the utter wisdom of divine intelligence, in the wisdom of God, God saw fit to make you look how you look, however that is. However that is. And there's beauty in that. And I believe that should be celebrated. I don't believe that should mean that one should try to shame what other people's form is, whether that's a person who's very short or very tall, very large or very small, if their skin is very fair or very dark, if a person is in a male body, a female body, or androgynous. I don't believe that any of us should shame anybody on their own biology, their physical makeup. I don't believe that that's right, that we should do that. But it's a reality of what still happens in this world in 2020, nonetheless. Uh, and that definitely saddens me because we can't mistreat somebody else without forgetting who we really are. All right? You get that? We can't do wrong to another person without not really knowing who we are. There's no way we can truly know who we are as expressions of divinity manifested and living in the earth. We can't know that and do wrong to other people. I learned in a psychology class in high school that for a person to do harm, to kill somebody, or to physically, consciously do another person harm, they can't do that without believing that the person is either less than human or at least less than them. All right. And I've talked before, I think last week, about how, we're all different and various in sundry ways. And I don't think that's anything to be avoided. I think it should be celebrated. I think there's beauty in that, that we should embrace and celebrate. Not that we have to look or act like other people or expect other people to look or act like us. It's a beautiful um, mixture of various colors and shades and textures that I believe is part of the artistry of God at work. And everything that God said, from a biblical perspective, everything that God said, there was a statement behind it. It is good. All right. And so I believe that there's beauty in all of it, in all of it. Now, sometimes we get this idea that different has to mean deficient. Somebody thinking, believing, feeling, loving, looking differently than we do. We somehow get the idea that one of us must be wrong or one of us must be falling short. And nobody wants to be the one who's wrong, the one who's less than, the one who's falling short. And so then, out of a sense of insecurity, sometimes we end up shaming other people, downing other people. We try to push other people down to make ourselves feel stronger. And really, that's not a sign of strength, it's a sign of profound weakness. It's a sign of profound weakness because anybody can tear somebody else down, but it takes a certain level of strength to build other people up. All right. My prayer is that we'll all live in a greater degree of strength. And so, being strong doesn't mean that you don't hurt. Being strong doesn't mean that you don't have moments of sadness and moments of pain. Being strong doesn't mean that you don't have moments of anger and frustration and grief and regret. That's not a sign of being strong. As a man, men are frequently taught to be more intellectual and more physical and less emotional. All right. There are certain things that can be broken down into masculine and feminine. In terms of the masculine side, there's intellect, physical things, outward action, things of that nature. Whereas the feminine nature is actually the emotional aspects, the spiritual aspects, the taking in, receiving, reflecting, intuition, things of that nature. Now we all of that exists within all of us, but we have particular leanings, typically based on our gender, of how we flow in those different things. All right. And so there was somewhere I was going with that, and I'm sorry that I temporarily lost where I was going with that, or temporarily disremembered, as my late grandfather John A. Hall would say, where I was going with that. But yesterday um, well, let me back up. Okay, you all, if you're watching this, you perhaps know me to be a person who's in ministry. You may know me to be a healer. Um, you may know that I teach and train people how to utilize a methodology of healing. And in addition to that, I also do some part-time work with a nonprofit where we actually train people in things that are related to job search. Okay, we have a lot of different classes that relate to empowering people at a time where there are 40 million people who are looking for work in the United States of America. It's a particularly valuable service. And the person that I've always been as a teacher and as a trainer, as an educator, is to give people a sense of worth and value, a sense of self efficacy, to encourage people, to let them know that I believe in them and encourage them to believe in themselves to achieve their dreams, whatever those are. And so we get a lot of people who are displaced for one reason or another, and we offer a variety of a lot of things aren't really so commonly known as it relates to finding a job today, hiring your next employer today. And so um, co-instructor and I, Sandy Adams and I, teach a class on Tuesday. We team teach a class on Tuesday via Zoom. We used to teach the classes in person, but since this whole COVID-19 situation, we've been doing it remotely uh, on Zoom. And there have been situations where people have been coming into classes, taking over people's screens, writing vulgar things on the screens, sending private messages to people that were inappropriate. They weren't there to actually learn, but they were just coming in to wreak havoc. Now, we had never experienced that. Had been experienced in many of the other classes. It hadn't been experienced in any of our Tuesday classes yet, and I hadn't experienced it in any of the classes, any of the special topic classes that I teach on my own either. So yesterday, again, we team teach. Sandy Adams and I, she'll teach certain sections, and I'll teach certain sections in this Tuesday class. And during the time when I was teaching, she kind of immediately draw attention to a situation where there was somebody who was in the class who did not have good intentions. It took us a significant period of time. We had to remove everybody, nearly 60 people from the class, and let them in based on our confidence that they were legitimate people who were there wanting to learn um, as it relates to job search. And so everybody was put into the waiting room. They were asked to um, all share their camera so we could see who they were and verify um, who the people were, because there had been a comment that had been put in using a false name, actually my coworker's name, just spelled differently, and there was a nefarious link that was included. Um, Again, from a person who had bad intentions, and I noticed that there was in the waiting room, one of the people in the waiting room had as, and if you're not familiar with Zoom, you can see uh, people's image if they choose to have their camera on. They can share verbally if they choose to have their microphone on. You'll see their name there, and so we've taken all these steps, making sure we've turned off a lot of features to increase our security. We've required people register with a valid email to help increase our security and reduce the risk of these types of things happen. But folk have still found ways to do things. So I happen to notice there was one person in the waiting room that had as their name, had nigger something as their name. I couldn't see what the rest of their name was. Um, And I alerted our director of operations of that and asked if she removed the person, because there is a way to remove people. And I didn't know, I saw that the person's name disappeared. I didn't know if they renamed themselves or if they actually just, if they had been booted out. And then she ended up sending me, my director of operations ended up sending me a picture that showed there were actually several different instances of people using nigger or nigger or even registering under names like um, nigger at gmail.com, nigger at nigger.net, and all of these things. And um, I have to admit that we're talking about authenticity here, that actually bothered me a little bit more than I thought it would. The way that it affected me initially when I just saw the one wasn't quite as profound as then when I saw this whole slew of things. And I confess that it triggered something in me, that it definitely impacted me emotionally. Now, I'm a person who's on a spiritual journey. Some people considered me a spiritual teacher, honor me with that designation. Um, and it's one thing to feel like you should be somewhere or want to be in a certain frame of mind, um, or in a certain feeling space. Uh, but it can actually create problems within you if we're trying to act like we're one place and we're really somewhere totally different. It's really important that we own wherever it is that we are. If we're being spiritual doesn't mean you never get upset. It doesn't mean that you never feel saddened, that you never feel disappointed. It doesn't mean that you're so otherworldly that you don't have worldly experiences that impact you. Okay, and I think that's a misnomer sometimes, that we think that being spiritual means that you're always on a cloud somewhere, or that you're always in a happy, feel good place, and that's not necessarily the case. Part of spirituality is being true to who it is that you really are and being true to where it is that you really are. Now, that doesn't mean that we get stuck in a place. We don't want to get stuck in anger or get stuck in sadness or get stuck in grief or get stuck in our trauma or get stuck in our pain bodies, and however those pain bodies might get triggered. We don't want to get stuck there, but one of the things that actually gets us stuck is failure to acknowledge where we actually are. All right? And so uh, the term emotion really deals with energy in motion. And emotions are actually likened to the element of water. All right. And so when you think about what's the nature of water, what's the nature of water? The nature of water is to flow, to be in movement. When water is not in movement, when water is stagnant, water becomes toxic. All right? When water is standing water becomes toxic. All right? In a similar way, emotions that are unprocessed, emotions that are not dealt with, emotions that are just buried deep down inside, they haven't gone anywhere. They're just sitting there corroding, creating toxicity within us that ends up manifesting not only as mental and emotional toxicity, but ends up coming out as physical toxins being harbored in the body. And they may be harbored in various and sundry places within the body, stored within the cells of the body in different places, creating sickness, illness, and dis-ease. within the body itself. And so it's important that we actually acknowledge the moments of discomfort, the moments of pain, no matter how deeply rooted they might be, or no matter how uncomfortable it might be for those uncomfortable feelings that come up. Now, I believe, in spite of this situation that happened yesterday, which really wasn't an isolated situation, for my experience of it, was it just compounding upon, stacked upon a tremendous amount of stuff just over so much time. It wasn't just because of what recently happened with Rayshard Brooks or Sandra Bland or Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor or George Floyd or Tamir Rice or Philando Castile, or I could go on and on and on about those. It wasn't just because of that. It wasn't just because of the president of our nation saying that Black Lives Matter is a hate group, which to me is absolutely absurd for someone to say, for that to be somebody's reaction to somebody saying that their life matters. That's absurd to me, and I'm not saying that from a political standpoint. I'm saying it from a standpoint of just humanity. That seems absurd to me. In addition to all of these things, and still folks being, you know, uh, black woman in her heart, very, very fair skinned black woman in her car having lighter fluid doused on her and a lighter thrown in her car, setting her on fire in her car while she's just minding her own business in her car. Just happening to have a little bit of melanin in her skin. Okay, so it's not even just these things that are recently happening, but the culmination of all of these things that happen. And yes, it does hit me in a different way as a person who wears melanated skin. All right, so I'm very keen of that. And in that context, I still maintain that we're one. And I maintain that in the midst of it, there's the opportunity for a spiritual growth, including within me. All right. The reality is now, these folks who did this stuff, what's the natural, immediate human response? You know, the natural, immediate human response is anger, is a lot of emotions that don't particularly feel good. For people who might not have experienced that, it may be very uncomfortable to even hear somebody share something like that, to share their experience. Who has not experienced it, the stuff really, quite honestly, should feel uncomfortable. It's not supposed to feel good. It should feel uncomfortable enough to make us want to do something about it. Okay. Now, here's the challenge for me as a spiritual being, consciously on a spiritual journey. That whoever this person was, or whoever these people were, and whoever the folks are who are doing all of this violence and spewing all of this hatred, there's a growth opportunity, there's a healing opportunity, there's a moment of spiritual growth and development opportunity available for me and anybody else who experiences this kind of foolishness. All right. What is the opportunity in this? One is recognizing that no matter what things might seem like, that all of this is falling short of what's actually, regardless of what the appearances might be, all of the appearances fall short of what's actually true. It would be very, very tempting for me to walk in to that illusion of separation and limitation. All right. It would be very easy for me to see whoever this person was, or whoever these people were that were doing this and doing all of this craziness, to see them as separate from me, and for me to see myself as innately more good and see them as innately more bad. But that's not what I teach, right? That's not what I teach. And so I've got to live my own message. And the crazy thing about it is, what if this soul or these souls who are doing these things like this, people who are very outwardly racist. Now I realize I might lose some people here, so try to just flow with me on this. That the person who's outwardly racist may be my spiritual teacher, maybe even my greatest spiritual teacher. All right? Giving me the opportunity to see beyond the illusion. That they're a person who's wearing a disguise. That who they are really as a soul is not this hateful person who is attempting to terrorize people. All right? Who is really just living as a terrorist on a very human level. That's true. On another level, it's an expression of evil. That's true. On a yet much deeper level, what if this, and I don't believe by any means that God is a racist, but what if on a bigger, deeper level, this person is fulfilling a spiritual purpose? And these people who are doing these types of things are fulfilling a deeper spiritual purpose of calling us to see beyond where we really are, for bringing up to the surface that which has been buried for a long time. This is 2020, a year where we're called to create a greater sense of vision, to see things more clearly than we have before. Where racism didn't just start, sickness and disease didn't just start. People feeling isolated due to quarantine didn't just start. Now, quarantine might have just started a few months ago, but people feeling isolated didn't just start. But these different things that are happening are most certainly bringing things to the surface. They're definitely bringing things to the surface. There's a sense of division that has definitely been brought to the surface. It's not that it's just now coming up as something that exists, it's just coming to our awareness in a more clear way, in a less deniable way, in a much more obvious way, where we're seeing it with much more clarity than we ever have before, at least for many of us. Some have been clear about it for a long time. For many of us, we're just seeing it in a greater degree of clarity now than we have perhaps ever before. Okay? And so, like with this situation, what I'm called to, if I'm to take a great spiritual lesson out of this, one is owning the fact that the situation pissed me off. And I'm going to use that language because that's how I felt it. That's what my authentic feeling was. I'm not going to use some nice preacher language. That's the real authentic way that I felt it. And that's how I'm going to express it. That's one part. Owning that, allowing myself to feel those feelings, allowing myself to be there. And yet looking at it from an even deeper perspective of realizing that that person was there as my teacher to bring me a lesson. Now, God is ultimately the teacher, but God can take anything to communicate and speak to us and help us learn and grow in any situation. And the opportunity that I take on that situation brought to my doorstep was to see that this person is more than just a racist, hateful person. That this person is actually somebody who is also, like me, a spiritual being having a physical experience. I can write them off as somebody as less spiritually evolved than me. I can write them off as somebody who's less connected to a sense of universality and love than me. But what might serve me better than that is to see that this person is a soul who's wearing a disguise, is all of those things, who's come to teach me to remove the veils from my eyes and see beyond the illusion to who they really are. That beyond all of the hatefulness and beyond all of the terroristic actions, that's a soul loved by God. That I too am called to love from a place of purity of heart. That doesn't mean take their crap. Let me make that very clear. That doesn't mean don't establish boundaries. That's important. It doesn't mean just lay over and be a doormat. It absolutely does not mean that. Definitely, as an expression of self-love, boundaries have to be established. Definitely is, and is an expression of self-care and self-love. Certain things have to absolutely not be tolerated, but at the same time, I've got to check my heart, and I've got to check my spiritual eyes in terms of how I am seeing them. It was a difficult teaching. Before you judge the speck in your brother's eye, first cast out the plank in your own eye. That's not an easy teaching. It's much easier to just be pissed off and say that person's an asshole and leave it at that. Okay? It's a lot easier to do that. It's a whole lot easier to do that than to also look at in what ways am I having or conveying an air of superiority? In what ways am I seeking consciously or subconsciously to make somebody else feel a little bit less than, to make myself feel a little bit more powerful? Like I said, this person gave me the temptation to do that, to say that I'm more spiritually evolved, I'm more loving, I'm not hateful like this person is. And yet, in a way, that is subtly an air of superiority that could easily be taken. See, the ego takes on a lot of different disguises. The ego can take the disguise as a racist, or the ego can take the disguise of somebody who has a air or a sense of moral superiority. Okay? The reality of, at the end of the day, I'm a soul looking to walk in the way that I best know, and so is that soul. And if I can be successful in being authentic and at the same time seeing beyond all of the illusion to who it is that they really are, something may actually take place where the pain in me and the illusion in me and the pain in them and the illusion of them are both reconciled and resolved. And that's what this thing is really all about walking our authentic path, moving beyond all of the veils of illusion that life in this world presents us with, keeping our hearts pure in the midst of it all, no matter what the situations might be, and choosing to see through the eyes of love while at the same time establishing and holding to appropriate boundaries, and choosing to see wholeness in a person who all evidence speaks to them being something very less than that. To all accounts suggesting that they are completely broken, and in the midst of that choosing to see wholeness. Now, that stuff isn't always easy. God, it's not always easy. But I really do believe that if we are willing to take that on, that's just part of the work. That's part of the journey. None of us came here to be born just to live happily ever after. Now, there is a happily ever after, I believe. And I also believe the truth of a very simple song that says, row, row, row your boat simply down the stream. Merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream. We're all, to a greater or lesser extent, living in a dream. No matter how woke any of us thinks we are, we're all still living in a dream, in a maya, in an illusion where things really aren't as they seem. Course in Miracles even talks about the dream that was a nightmare becomes a pleasant dream. And then it becomes no more a dream because we've woken up, and all of this, the good, the bad, and the in between, all of it goes away. And that's what ascension really is. And that's what the journey of life on planet Earth is really about. Is about spiritual transmutation, of taking the base elements, the base characteristics of our personality and the totality of human experience, and transmuting that into the gold of the soul, or the ether of spirit. Okay, the essence of what life really is. That's what the journey is really all about. That's what life on planet Earth is really all about. About coming into an experience that is full of illusion, that manifests in a million different ways. And coming to the point where we see beyond it all and don't get caught up in any of the traps, no matter how painful, no matter how pleasant, realizing that it's all a figment of our imagination and that there's a greater truth beyond it all. And that's what our challenge is, that's what our journey is to return to that ultimate truth. I believe that in the United States of America and in the earth itself, we've been going through a point where we didn't realize that we were asleep. And in many ways are waking up and don't like the bad dream that we've been living in. We don't like the bad dream that we've been living in, but I learned in a dream interpretation class many years ago that a nightmare actually brings a gift of showing us where we actually are, showing what's actually going on in our psyche, maybe in the deep, subtle recesses of our subconscious mind. And so the fact that we're waking up to what we're experiencing as a nightmare, that's not bad. We don't want to go to sleep and try to have a better dream. It's much better to really take a look at the elements of the nightmare that we've been experiencing, I'm realizing um, I'm running out of juice. Give me just a moment. I don't know if the video is still going or not, but my computer is about to shut off because my battery is running low. I apologize for this momentary interruption. Hopefully you are still able to hear me and now see me. I'm just going to keep going whether you can or not. This happened once before, and I found out that people could still hear and see me. So we're just going to continue on with this. But we may be experiencing what might feel like a nightmare on so many levels in terms of feelings of isolation because things are shut down because of this whole coronavirus situation. We may be feeling nightmarish things in terms of things that are going on socially and politically. We might be feeling, those of us who wear skin of darker hue might be going through nightmarish experiences because we don't even feel safe to go to the corner store. All of those things may feel very nightmarish, but I do believe that we're moving into a place where we're moving towards a more pleasant dream. Okay, that there is a cleansing process that we're going through, and sometimes the cleansing process doesn't feel comfortable at all, you know. But the benefits of getting that toxic stuff out of our system, even though it may feel uncomfortable in the moment that we're going through it, once it comes out, we end up feeling much better. We end up being much more healthy. And I believe that that's what's happening right now in our country and in our world. And beyond that, I believe that we are all really moving in the direction of all waking up beyond this illusion. As knee deep as we might be in it, or in many cases where it's over our heads, in the Maya, in the illusion, I believe that we are all going to experience something much, much more beautiful, of a world where there truly is harmony and unity and universal love and acceptance and peace and embracing and celebrating all life in all of its various and sundry forms. I believe in that. I believe in that. We might not get there at the same moment, but I do believe that we'll all get there. I truly do. I truly do. No matter where a person is on the journey, every single one of us is equally loved and cherished by God. No matter where you might be on your journey, you might have some difficult things that you're going through right now. You might have some things that you've been through that are indescribable, that are showing up in your life now that you might be just now dealing with, and it might feel very, very painful and uncomfortable. And I want you to know I understand. I love and I support you. And I know that it's going to be okay. We've got all stuff that we're working out. Scripture talks about working out our salvation with awe, trembling. There's stuff that we all need to work out. It's not always going to be easy, but I do believe that it's worth every bit of it. I see a time where the earth shines brightly with loving souls all over the planet, and in fact, that's the case now. We might not see it as much, but I believe in a world of unity and harmony and peace where we are bestowing grace upon one another and ourselves, seeing ourselves and one another through the eyes of love. And we do that more and more the more we feel worthy of love ourselves. The person who truly feels worthy of love does not have space in their heart to hate another. I believe that we are one humanity that is moving more and more fully in a direction of expressing and living out the fruit of our oneness. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, baby. Will you join me in it? I just want to invite everybody right now who is viewing this live video or who might be checking it out on a playback to just take a moment and allow a little bit more love into our own hearts, a little more forgiveness towards ourselves for whatever way we've punished ourselves. We may have punished ourselves by not being receptive to love as much as we could. We might punish ourselves by withholding love from others. We might punish ourselves through condemning others, judging others. Let us open up a little bit more room in our heart for forgiveness of ourselves, because that's where it first starts. For seeing ourselves or our brothers or our sisters in creation as something other than perfect and pure and loving and lovable in the sight of God. When we can truly forgive ourselves, we don't really need to forgive anybody else, because the presence of each and every other soul in creation exists within us, because we're all intimately and intricately interconnected. We're all one. And how we see everyone else is a manifestation in one way or another of how we see ourselves. So let's be more loving towards ourselves. Be more forgiving of ourselves, which allows us to be more loving of one another. And in that creates healing in us and in that other. If nobody else has told you today, you're precious and you're special and you're unique and you're beautiful. There's nobody else like you, never has been, never will be. You've got one shot in this body that you're in right now. I hope that you'll treat it with good care and with love and with affection. Regardless of how anybody else might see you, may you see yourself through loving, pure eyes. God bless you. I love you. See you soon.